Too hot for TV.
Welcome back to Doctor Who Too Hot for TV. We are the podcast that looks at all things Doctor Who Extended Universe. Today, I'm joined by someone who's not been on this podcast before. It's Ioan Morris. Ioan, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent.
Very excited to be on board.
It's wonderful to have you here. Have you done any podcasting in the past?
Stupid personal stuff, yeah, which
Right.
I don't want to tell anyone about. But I'm aware of how a microphone works, so I should be okay.
Excellent, great. And we've talked Doctor Who bollocks many times before, so I'm
Yes.
sure we'll be fine.
Is there any other kind of Doctor Who talk? I don't think so.
No, there is not. So I start asking all my new guests this. How did you become a Doctor Who fan? When did you become a Doctor Who fan?
I imagine I had quite a similar journey to you as a child of the wilderness years. Here's a name that's going to come up probably quite a lot over the course of this. My friend Mikey and I first watched a videotape that his dad had got him when we were about 6, 7 years old, and it was the Sontaran Experiment Genesis of the Daleks, double VHS. Classic, a great one to get in the door with, and we were absolutely hooked the moment we saw that. He may have seen one or two before that, but that was the one that got me in through the door. I think time-wise, it works out that then went to the repeat season, 1992. Definitely saw some of those. Remember the Mind Robber especially. And then probably confirmed by one of the documentaries coming up that we'll be talking about today, 30 Years in the TARDIS.
Excellent.
And then I got my first Doctor Who VHS that Christmas, Curse of Peladon. And I think that was set for life after that.
Great. With that 30th anniversary logo on the side of the Curse of Peladon VHS, I can see it now.
Yeah. And I've had lots of ins and outs since then, as most people do, as it were.
What was your longest out?
It's been a while now. No, I'm still there. I'm still there. But I imagine it was when I was late teens and going to university. And of course, then it comes back when I'm in university and I moved back to Wales. I grew up in a small town called Brecon. But when I came back to Wales, I moved to Cardiff where Doctor Who was being shot. And that was just unbelievable, of course, if you grew up in a small Welsh town and then 20 some odd years later, probably a little less, Doctor Who is being filmed down the road from where you grew up. And in fact, The Unquiet Dead mentions Brecon.
It does.
Which was just, it blew my mind. So, of course, as a childhood fan who'd been in the playground playing this cancelled television show, much to the laughter of other schoolmates, it's come back and it's the biggest thing on TV. And, of course, then you get to, get to be a bit smug about it.
Vindication right there. Vindication. Doctor Who has never really skirted around my hometown of Birmingham. Although I did discover a couple of years ago, reading Paul Hayes' fantastic book, The Long Game, on the show's return, that Birmingham was one of the places considered for the 2005 revival before it ended up in Wales. So could have been another world.
Wow. Well, you've got Horrorfang Rock, Pebble Mill, right? That was Birmingham.
That was Birmingham.
And that's it.
That's pretty much it, yeah. There's like a New Adventure where there's like a chapter set there, and a new Doctor Who Adventures comic, I think, that might mention it. And in Talons, you've got, Made in Birmingham, but that's about it.
That's true. Well, it's not like they ever, these days, there's nothing about Cardiff in it these days. So the thrill of it having been in Cardiff is long since gone.
No, but to be fair, whenever they're in anywhere else, it looks a lot like Cardiff.
It does happen to look a little bit like Cardiff, yeah.
I was in Cardiff a couple of years ago for a weekend on the piss and location visiting and all that. And as I started to look up the locations, I was like, wow, these streets have been used a lot for various, and they're still using them. Come on, Russell, get a bigger map.
A lovely gentleman, Jess Jerkovic, wonderful YouTube channel. Go look it up if you haven't. I'm sure you know about it, obviously. He came to the UK a little while ago and he popped down to Cardiff for the day, met up with him, showed him round Cardiff, showed him every street corner, was telling him which episodes it's from. Then we sat down and had a coffee and he's like, you know what, I haven't really seen the new series all that much. So I just spent 2 hours telling him every corner. You see that street sign there? That they actually use that in the show, and he don't think he cared in the slightest.
He should have gone to Acton and just, that's around the classic series. You get it all around West London and places.
Yeah, Coach and Horses, that's where he should have gone.
Exactly. So what's your relationship like with Doctor Who spin-off media?
I have worked on some spin-off media over the years. I started a Doctor Who quiz with Mikey, the aforementioned Mikey, in about 2010. He was the impetus behind it. I rode his coattails. And it went quite well. We had a lot of fan groups from Cardiff area come along. We even had some of the production crew come along, got to know them a little bit. And I got to know a guy named Scott Hancock, who was a producer at Big Finish. I think I saw on Twitter one day that he was looking for musicians to add a bit of music to a release for a series called Dorian Gray. And I offered to do that, which I did with my friend Reese. And after that, did a bit more music, started composing for a few of their bits and pieces, did Gallifrey, did War Master. And so I've been involved in the spin-off world. Maybe I've put it to bed now that I feel comfortable coming to do podcasts about the spin-off world. I'm not sure. Maybe this is me signing off informally.
And we're not going to slag off any of those things you've worked on today.
No, as I said before we started recording, I've gone for choices that are very unlikely to include someone I've worked with. So I can insult everyone I'm talking about today, which is great.
Excellent. So we're going to do 3 documentaries today. Now, we've done a few little documentary things on this before, but never a whole episode. So why don't you tell everybody the 3 things you've chosen to look at?
Okay, so we're going to start with the granddaddy of them all, Who's Doctor Who? 1978, was it? 1977, 78?
77.
Sure. And then we'll move on a little while to 30 Years in the TARDIS, broadcast edition, which I have to say, I don't think I had seen since 1993.
It's been
I'd
a while
seen the video,
for me too.
Of course, and I hadn't even seen that version in at least 10 years, so this was kind of fresh to me. And then finally, we're going to do the episode of Doctor Who Confidential, Do You Remember the First Time?, presented by David Tennant himself.
Indeed. Well, let's jump into the first documentary, which is Who's Doctor Who, a 60-minute television documentary, part of the BBC's Lively Art series, transmitted on Sunday the 3rd of April 1977 on BBC Two. Produced and directed by Tony Cash and presented by Melvyn Bragg. Now, I don't have a lot of news at the time, but I can tell you on television was the final episode of The Talons of Weng Chiang. The TV comic at the time was The Fire Feeders, featuring the 4th Doctor and someone called Inspector Keel, and the Target novelisation Doctor Who and the Claws of Axos was first published. So we are right in a perceived golden era of Doctor Who.
Yeah, that's kind of, I'll bring it up again, I'm sure, but it's kind of interesting to top and tail with 2 contemporary documentaries that are being made while the show is at, kind of a peak of popularity.
Yeah.
And to see how they approach that differently in the different times. And then 1993, which I imagine was, I know it was an anniversary year, but I can't imagine the public perception of the show itself was at a very high point in 1993.
No.
So it's interesting to compare and contrast.
Absolutely. So when did you first see Who's Doctor Who?
Whenever the Talons DVD came out, that was a story that I had chased for a while. It was one of those ones I'd seen on the inside cover of a couple of videos. I, of course, didn't know how to get hold of these old videos, didn't know if it was deleted or what.
Yeah.
And I ended up seeing quite late in my Doctor Who fandom from a UK Gold transmission, I think. I think I got someone to record UK Gold because we didn't have Sky. So that's how I saw it for the first time. Became an instant favourite, despite its problematic elements, and which even at the age of 12, I was very well aware of course, and frowned upon them. But I enjoyed it nonetheless. And when the DVD came out, I bought it instantly. Some of them I kind of left, I didn't fancy spending the money on, but that one I got straight away. And the documentary was a completely new thing to me. I didn't even know it existed.
Oh, wow. So I saw Talons when I was very young, and it wasn't until the DVD came out at, say, age 20 or something that I was like, hang on, I don't think that man's Chinese. It just never occurred to me watching us as a 8-year-old, this grainy TV show. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure this is okay. It just never occurred. And then obviously it became part of the dialogue of fandom, causing much upset.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think they even bring it up in the documentary at all.
No, not the contemporary one. It's only around the Blu-ray. I think it's the Time team, isn't it? In Doctor Who magazine, right, with Beth and Crystal and all those lovely people. And they're the first people to really say in a print publication, this isn't okay.
Right, but I don't think John Bennett, is it John Bennett in Talons? He's not featured in the documentary at all. And they show a couple of clips from the episode, but they largely skirt around that side of the production entirely. So maybe at the time, the production team of Who's Doctor Who were like, yeah, we're not touching that part of it, but the rest is fine.
I mean, this isn't a podcast about Talons of Wing Chiang, but it was broadcast in the UK, whatever. As far as we know, no real complaints about it. But it was not broadcast in Canada, who showed it to a Canadian community of people of Asian descent, like the sort of local council of it, and they said this is really offensive, and the channel went, well, no, we won't. We're not going to show this then.
Wow.
And that would only have been a year or so later. So the idea, yes, it is of its time, but the idea that it was of its time and nobody was thinking about it certainly wasn't true in Canada.
Good on Canada. But thankfully, none of those problematic elements are in Who's Doctor Who that I can remember that I watched it 4 days ago. So I can happily watch that and talk about that.
Excellent.
And that's a relief, isn't it?
So can you remember your first thoughts on it and how you feel about it now?
I thought and think it's a very classy bit of work. You mentioned Melvyn Bragg. Hang on, I'm going to take a little bit of a sidebar here because I made loads of notes and loads of clever insights and questions. And then I watched the documentary on the Blu-ray where they revisit Who's Doctor Who. And that scoundrel Toby Haydock does it all in a very fun and thorough and self-effacing way. And it's ruined everything I had to say.
Classic Toby Haydock.
Hey, damn him. But I obviously didn't know when I was watching it that Melvyn Bragg wasn't really involved in the making of it. He just tops and tails it and adds a little couple of links into it. But just his presence adds quite a bit of legitimacy. And I think as Doctor Who fans, we crave legitimacy. And it kind of stands up in that way, I think. It's a fairly serious examination of a very silly TV show.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's interesting that they look at sort of the psychological impact of the show on children. I mean, how does that come across to sort of modern eyes?
It's funny, isn't it? You can see, just from watching the documentaries, the time of day and the channel that they went out on. This one is aimed at a post-watershed arts crowd.
Yeah.
30 Years in the TARDIS is clearly just like an extended episode of the One Show. And then the episode of Confidential just burrows deep into nostalgia and completely unashamedly, and is for a fan crowd. That is the crowd they're expecting to watch it. So they're made for very different audiences. I'm sure there's loads of child psychology developments that I'm unaware of as a freelancer who has had no contact with child psychology ever. But that was interesting nonetheless. I mean, it's a time capsule, so all that stuff is... Oh, I will say that the one guy who's talking about autism, that clanged with me immediately. But we can get to him a bit more fully later. But I did like that they were taking that aspect of it, you know, the effect it had on different audiences, their response to it. I guess it's a more worthy response to a child's TV show, but I found it interesting.
It's interesting. So, I mean, you talk about the autism thing, and as you say, there is a bit of a sort of clang to it. But also, you kind of think, well, I wasn't really aware that people were addressing sort of those diagnoses within children at that time. So it is, even if it's an outdated view, shall we say, it's actually quite a progressive one at the same time.
Yeah, it's taken the subject matter very seriously. And you can understand why they only invited Radio Times readers to get involved for that reason. I do love that you can immediately tell, once you know that fact, that they asked Radio Times readers to get in touch. You're like, oh, yeah, I see that. And then later on the documentary, about the documentary, they revealed that the students were actually members of DWAS, which is very obvious when you know that that's the case. And all the more amusing for it. I was kind of baffled by this term educationalist that they kept using for a couple of the contributors, because there is somebody they refer to as a teacher in there as well. So apparently educationalist is a separate thing entirely. And I don't know, what a strange term. I've never heard it before.
No, an outdated one for sure. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll describe myself as an educationalist on this podcast, sort of delivering knowledge and facts about Doctor Who spin-off.
Yeah, I don't think it's anything you can take a degree for anymore. So you just go ahead. It did seem like kind of like an amateur term somebody might give themselves, you know, like those people who dress up and recreate battles of the weekend. Maybe that's like the educational version of that. They want to be a teacher really badly, but they're not willing to put the effort in. So they just call themselves educationalists.
Yeah, or those nutritionists who call themselves doctors but don't actually have proper doctorates. And then you see them confidently commenting on a COVID vaccine, and you're like, but are you a proper doctor?
Yeah, it's the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian, and you're never quite sure which one's the legitimate one. Don't go to an educationalist, children. It won't end well.
You'll end up being a member of the DWAS in the 1970s.
Yeah. You'll have to wear velvet. There's no other option.
The use of people from the DWAS is quite interesting, especially, I'm assuming she's one of the DWAS members, the young woman who talks about sort of the sexism within Doctor Who, which, again, something that I wouldn't necessarily expect a 1970s documentary to look into.
No, it is an interesting one. I think it runs through all three documentaries. They really don't pay that much attention to the companions. As major a part as we feel they are now of the series, the reaction from most of the contributors in all these shows is that they got in the way, at best. 30 years in the TARDIS is worse still in its attitude towards them. But in this, it is kind of fascinating to see that they thought Sarah was just a screamer and that's all she did. That's obviously been reappraised now, but it is interesting to get that contemporary attitude towards her. And the kids especially in the classroom, they seem to get a lot more from Leela. I don't know if that's just because she was the current companion. I don't know, but I can understand why a child might be more drawn to that kind of character.
Absolutely. It's a more exciting, more action adventure character. I mean, she's still there to get in trouble in many respects, but it just feels like she can get herself out of the trouble. And especially after like 3 companions from contemporary Earth that they've had in the 70s at that point.
Yeah, and she doesn't scream. If that was your complaint, that they scream, she doesn't scream. So she's got that one over the other ones as well.
Absolutely. So what does this tell us about the production process of Doctor Who at the time?
Well, I thought all the production stuff was brilliant. I thought the fact that it's shot on film, and especially if you're watching on Blu-ray, most of it looks glorious. The sets especially, when you see them on film, you think that's worthy of a film itself. There's other aspects that are shown up to be worse, when they're on film, like the rat, unfortunately. But it doesn't seem unprofessional in any way at all. But there is more of a casualness to it. And something that I have quite a lot of affection for now in seeing it is that kind of relaxed nature around the production. I don't know his name, the guy who's doing the explosion stuff. That was brilliant. We just shouted, "There's going to be an explosion." And before anyone had had a chance to do anything about it, he'd set it off. So I suppose it's a health and safety thing. That you can't do that anymore.
Absolutely. I love how much time is dedicated to the effect of the rat, and just like, without them knowing, it would become one of Doctor Who's most notorious sort of bad special effects.
God, I know.
It's just like they're talking, but it also shows how much effort they were putting into the thought process behind the rat and going, we're going to make this really good, and like, we've got this contraption that attaches to the actor, and this is how the mechanics of it all works. And you go, they've really put a lot of time and effort into this thing, and we're just sat somewhere 40 years later cracking a beer laughing at the shit rat.
Oh God. And I actually remembered it in my mind of having last watched Who's Doctor Who. I was thinking, actually, I'm pretty sure the rat looks better on film, but no, it does not look better on film. And there's a moment slightly earlier, probably about 5 minutes earlier in the documentary, where I think I've got the quote here. Philip Hinchcliffe says, "You just need one element of the production to go wrong and you've destroyed the illusion." And at that moment, you're expecting a hard cut to them making the rat. They don't. I can't remember where they go, actually. But that's what, in my mind, I was like, oh, please do not go to the rat next. And they don't. Maybe these days you would. If you were unkind, you made like an edited version. If Benjamin Cook makes an edited version of Who's Doctor Who, he can do a hard cut straight from Philip Hinchcliffe saying that to the China rat.
Exactly. I think it's interesting that, knowing sort of what we know about Talons now, Philip Hinchcliffe's doing this documentary, knowing he's going to move on, knowing that he's spending all the money that he shouldn't be spending and screwing over the next producer. And he's just talking very matter-of-factly about it like it's another day, any other day in the office.
I know that the timing of it is weird, because they obviously go back then to do a story conference, a made-up story conference between Robert Holmes and Terrance Dicks and Graham Williams, I think. Which I don't think I ever twigged as being out of order when I watched it originally. I don't think I ever knew that was Graham Williams. But now that you do, you're like, where did this come from? Or at what point do they say we need this kind of material in it to go back? So the timeline would be fascinating. I'd love to know if any of the Philip Hinchcliffe stuff was recorded after he'd already gone and they had to place it back in,
I wonder if they were like, well, we'll come and do a day this week, a day next week. And then they look at the footage and they go, well, we need something about the script. And then Graham Williams is like, yeah, well, we're already working on the next scripts now. That one's done. And they're like, well, just pretend that you were working on the last one.
Right. And I'm sure when I watched it, whenever it came out on DVD, I had no knowledge that this was a fake thing.
No.
So I think I must just assumed they were talking about some story that never got made. And I was fascinated by this sentence Terrance Dicks comes up with about, I can't even remember what bollocks he's talking. But I just thought, oh, this must have been an episode that he pitched that never got made. And of course, it's nonsense. And this time I was wondering if the same was true of Dudley Simpson, because it's got the quality of a Robert Altman film where they're all sat in that room together and you've got this slow 70s zoom into the screen, and then you pull back out and Dudley's saying, I was thinking about a cello here and a car engine spring for this, and he's absolutely thrilled with the idea. I could watch that stuff for hours. I loved all that stuff, and I don't even know how much of it was real.
Well, I'd
love to watch it all.
I feel like if you see Dudley's like myth makers or interviews, he's like, well, they just sort of left me to it, left me in a cupboard, and I sort of did what I needed to do with the sort of 4-piece band that I had. So, I mean, maybe those meetings did happen, but also when you think of, sorry if Jess is listening, but how similar a lot of Dudley's scores were around that time. It's like, it's not like you go get the Talons one and go, well, this is markedly different to anything else he'd done that season.
He had his ensemble set at that point, so I don't think it would have been a surprise to anyone that he was thinking of pulling out the cello or the marimba. You know,
the
the
car
marimba
spring.
again. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, that'll make a nice change, Dudley.
Yeah. It would have been more of a surprise because I thought a nice Spanish guitar here. How about that?
Whoa. Yeah. Maybe they swore and they just couldn't use that take. They were so surprised by his suggestion.
Obviously, we get a interview with Tom Baker while he's in the role, and a look at him in rehearsal. Whether it was actually rehearsal, who knows? I think it would have been. I think it's actual rehearsal footage because you're not getting Deep Roy back just to do a pretend rehearsal, are you? I think that's the stuff that's real. But we've heard for years about the Acton Hilton or whatever they used to call it, and to see it and it just be exactly what they said it was, a disappointing hall somewhere, is quite fantastic.
Yeah, it seemed to be like a youth centre or something, where downstairs there was a foosball table and a bloke with like a little reception/bar, and you kind of imagine that he had cans of Tizer or something back there that he was selling them, that Tom poured a little bit of gin in every afternoon. But that is honestly part of my affection for it, is seeing that process, because in TV these days, that kind of rehearsal is not a thing that people do anymore. There's a different focus, there's a different time element, all that sort of stuff. So to get anything of that process is fascinating. And who knows if it's Tom playing it for the camera, but to be in that position as the lead of the show and so openly talking about changing the script while you're on camera is quite something. You would not get that now. Whether it happens or not, you would not get an actor openly talking about changing the script that they are working on. And
he says, it's exactly how you sort of expect him to be when people talk about him at the time. He goes, well, they all think they know better, but I know better. And we sort of have it out. And then, we sort of end up with a compromise in the middle. And it's quite interesting to hear him so bluntly say, yeah, I'm a fucking nightmare. And not so many words.
There's an insolence there that is fascinating. It's absolutely of its time. It's there. It exists now. It has to. There's still huge egos. It's just people weren't as open about it. And he was Tom fucking Baker. What are they going to do,
Absolutely.
And he lives up to it. Yeah. I'm also fascinated by the fact that from his interview where he's talking about the past Doctors, I don't know if these sort of reputations about the characters of the previous Doctors existed before. They must have to some extent. But he seems to make them concrete. And they kind of seem like that's the origin of a lot of shorthand of how people describe those characters.
And of course, this same interview shows up in 30 Years in the TARDIS. So
right, which I'd totally forgotten about.
Yeah, which is the first time I would have seen it. So I think, when he goes, he's rather like a tall light bulb, isn't he? Glitters.
Yes.
And
very good, by the way.
I try. It's sort of, through those two documentaries, embedded itself into the brains of two generations of fans. So no wonder they stuck around.
Yeah, I was definitely aware while I was watching it. Is this where like the cultural memory of Doctor Who fandom actually comes from, more than from the show itself? The fact that these things were repeated on a show and demonstrated to be significant moments within Doctor Who, thereby making them significant. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a sense where the choices of the producers and the clips they show are enforcing that or reinforcing that. But there's also examples where all the children give of clips from like Seeds of Doom and Terror of the Autons that aren't led by the producers. These are just things they do actually remember. So it's a bit more of a push and pull than you might imagine. But yeah, especially the stuff that is repeated across different documentaries just becomes a shorthand then, doesn't it?
Yeah. What do we think of the use of archive in it? Because obviously this is the one we're going to talk about that I think probably has the least amount of archive. But there's still a lot of clips from classic Doctor Who that's used to sort of illustrate the programme. And I think it's quite telling that perhaps in this version they're not the most... It's not the Daleks coming out of the water and things like that in Daleks' Invasion of Earth, and it's not necessarily Do I Have the Right? It's quite an eclectic group of clips, I think.
It is, and it must have been extraordinary if you were a fan at the time to get these fairly lengthy clips from black and white Doctor Who that presumably most of them hadn't seen in years. and they're well chosen. The clips, I'll be honest, are, of course, at this point, the element of the documentaries I'm least interested in. I've seen them 1,000 times.
Yeah.
I've seen them in documentaries. I've seen them in documentaries about documentaries. So I don't need to see them again. This one, just in the way that it does with the whole of Doctor Who, takes a slightly more educationalist approach to Doctor Who and tries to use the clips to illustrate more worthy concepts. I wrote some of them down, if I can find them. Political. Why did I have to write these down? Political, metaphysical. I don't know why, but some of them were metaphysical and scientific examples. And it tries to use the clips where it can to demonstrate those aspects of the show. I think almost justifying its inclusion as part of an arts program, I suppose. But still interesting to be able to make those choices about Doctor Who and showing that it does, if you look for it, have that kind of depth.
Yeah, I'm quite interested in the sort of archive nature of the clips as well. So obviously they're limited in the choices they can make. There's some clips from Galaxy 4 in there, which are the reason about 5 minutes of Galaxy 4 episode 1 survived for many years in the hands of fans. And just the quality of the clips when you see them presented, they're presented unrestored or probably in the nearest format to broadcast than you would probably get. But even so, Terror of the Autons, the clips in black and white, and it's very much like, oh, this is how people would remember that. And most people would have seen Terror of the Autons in black and white anyway. So the idea of it as a colour story, I'm sure only existed to like a third of the population or something anyway.
Yeah, that's very true. I hadn't really thought about that. And was this before they'd started junking stuff, or was it kind of happening around this time?
No, they were junking at that point, because if I'm getting this right and somebody will message me and say I'm wrong, the first example, the nearest example of junking is the Highlanders only existed for something like about a month after it was broadcast or something.
Right.
Then
Okay.
it was wiped. So
okay.
they were... I mean, some of the classic clips that perhaps they wanted to use, the more sort of cliche ones, just wouldn't have existed.
Right, of course, yeah. Oh, God, that's depressing. But I can't imagine what it would have been like to be a fan at the time and get this. It was the same for me when I was watching 30 Years in the TARDIS, that I didn't know any of this stuff. So everything they were showing me was a brand new world. It was a brand new story. I probably hadn't even heard of it, let alone seen it. So if you can't access it, if there's not going to be a way of accessing it, this must be mind-blowing.
Absolutely. And I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about the impact of the archival clips on 30 years, because that's something that we both sort of saw contemporaneously. But as you say, this is the generation of kids who saw Doctor Who once and then had the Target book, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. It must have been huge.
Have you got any favourite moments from this documentary?
I have a few. There's one that I noted down as soon as I saw it. There's kind of a very sad story associated with the family when you watch the revisiting documentary with Toby Haydock. And I won't say that because it's just sad. Yeah. But when the mother of the family in that moment in the documentary talks about wanting to play the part of a monster on the show, she does so in the tone that makes it seem like it might be a little bit of a fetish. She's slightly apologetic. She's slightly giggly. And I thought it felt like a Victoria Wood character or something, the way she was talking about it. That's one of the brilliant things about this documentary. It's just because of when it was shot, people were so less familiar with being in front of a camera. So they're less prepossessing, they're less polished. I think they're more open to just speaking openly about how they feel. And there's a beauty in that. There's not, everything else I think really has professional contributors and they all know how to talk in front of cameras. Getting this aspect of fandom in there is really fun and sweet to see. And I really enjoyed that moment. If we could talk a little bit about John Miller, the educational psychologist. Like, this guy was the protagonist of the documentary to me. I was fascinated by this guy. The moment I saw him, he's wearing like a leather jacket and a turtleneck. I'm thinking this guy could have been the lead in a supernatural drama in the late 70s.
He could be from Doomwatch or something like that.
Yes. If you hadn't seen Doomwatch, if somebody told you that John Miller from Who's Doctor Who was a character in Doomwatch, you would absolutely believe it. The way he talks about human nature having a dark side, but he says it in a way that it's more of a confession. I just thought that was beautifully acted by John Miller. And Big Finish would obviously commission 3 box set series from him immediately. But he did make an interesting point at the end when he talks about the Doctor more often than not needing to abandon his scientific knowledge and then rely on courage and faith, and how that related to fairy stories and that kind of thing. And that was kind of a point I obviously hadn't taken that on board. But that is one point from this documentary that a contributor made that really stuck with me about the shape of Doctor Who stories. That we think of it of being science fiction, but then when the moment comes in the episode that he needs to do something, so often it isn't about that at all. And he becomes a traditional hero in a lot of ways. So that was very interesting from his perspective. Like I said at the start, I'm sure some of the attitudes to child psychology have changed in the 50 years since. But that guy was absolutely fascinating. And it was great that they brought him back for the revisited documentary as well.
Yeah. I just love the it's a very yellow documentary. It's yellows and dark greens. It's so 70s. And even when people aren't sat smoking pipes, everything just seems to have a haze of smoke and tinged yellowness to it, because it's shot on film, because it's the 70s and everybody's been smoking for 30 years in each of those rooms or whatever. And it just it makes the past look like a foreign, like it's somewhere foreign, somewhere alien, in a way that I think of the 70s as being quite close, or at least I did in the 90s. When I grew up, it was, 12, 13, 14 years ago, but it just seems such an alien landscape now, looking at the 70s in the archival footage.
It does. Like, every white contributor in there has a skin tone that you'd probably describe as pallid. They don't look like they're getting enough fruits and vegetables in their diet. And it does speak of the time it was made. The fashions are absolutely extraordinary. I think part of it comes down to the Radio Times contributor part of it as well.
Because everybody's been told to dress up smart by their mom as well.
It's like you're going to church, you're going to a funeral, or you're taking part in a BBC documentary about Doctor Who. Those are the 3 things you need to get dressed up for. And everyone puts on their Sunday best.
Because the Doctor Who of the 70s isn't as representative of the era as this documentary is. Like, whether it be the companions' clothing or when they do visit the actual 70s, like, it's a brighter and more fictitious world than this fucking pasta-coloured world that we're in.
Right, yeah, especially the Hinchcliffe era barely ever does present day.
Is there anything else you want to say on this one before we move on?
At one point, one of the schoolgirls says, "The Vegetable Man gave me a nightmare," and I don't know how that isn't a Doctor Who podcast. Why isn't that a Doctor Who podcast?
Well, when you start your Doctor Who podcast, that's what you can call it.
Coming soon, The Vegetable Man gave me a nightmare.
Excellent. I look forward to that. So we must rate it, and I've got a feeling I'm going to rate all these things the same tonight. But is it a clanger, a banger, or an average meander?
It's a banger. It's the bangerous banger that you can get.
It's an absolute banger. Great to revisit it. Great to see such a slice of 1970s served up with a sprinkling of Doctor Who.
Too hot for TV.
So, 30 Years in the TARDIS was broadcast on BBC One on the 29th of November 1993. It was directed by Kevin Davis. News at the time: BBC video/tape prices. First they were $24.99, then they were $10.99, and as a New Year surprise, BBC are offering to cut the price on 15 Doctor Who titles for the low price of $7.99. Included in that run was An Unearthly Child, The Aztecs, The Dominators, The Mind Robbers, The Claws of Axos, The Time Warrior, Terror of the Zygons, Brain of Morbius, Mordred Undead, The Curse of Fenric, plus Daleks and Cybermen the early years, and The Day of the Daleks, Ark in Space, and Pyramids of Mars in unedited format. Wowzers.
Wow, what a time to be alive.
Indeed. But I think that's when I mopped up quite a few of these on videotape because they were $7.99, and that was sort of, $7.99 is within the realms of 2 weeks pocket money. I think it was on a $5 a week,
Lucky you. I was still on like a birthdays and Christmas cycle. So, I had to, after Curse of Peladon, I had to pop to Woolworths with my birthday money and buy Arc of Infinity and not know any better. It's amazing I'm still here, quite frankly, after that trauma.
It is that thing of you were buying videos because they were Doctor Who and relying on the cover art that wasn't necessarily 100% accurate to what was on the video.
Those artists really should have given you some indication of the quality of the story on the video art. Some kind of coded system that they all used.
Yeah,
but sadly, that did not exist, and you had to take your chance.
Because the Arc of Infinity cover is it's a belter, isn't it?
It's Omega. I'm not sure if Petey's on there, but it's Omega's mask, definitely. And that kind of sells you on it.
You read the back and you go, oh, I know this. It's got Time Lords, great. It's got Omega, great. This is going to be absolutely fantastic. And then you're watching a giant turkey in Amsterdam. And
you're really trying to make the best of it, because otherwise you've wasted your last chance to buy a video for another several months.
And even if it's crap, you've got to watch it again and again and again, because you only own 6 videos.
Exactly, and I've watched Arc of Infinity far too many times in my life. As I'm approaching 40, I realise quite how much of my life I've wasted watching Arc of Infinity, and it's not a good thought. It keeps me up at night.
Yeah, you're going to watch it before you go to bed tonight, though, aren't you?
Oh, yes, great.
Other releases at the time, the new adventure was the Dimension Riders, featuring the 7th Doctor, Ace and Benny. We had Doctor Who The Handbook, the 6th Doctor. On television, we had Dimensions in Time. And on radio, we had Harry Hill's Fruit Corner. And you may ask yourself, what is that? And the answer is, it was a Harry Hill radio show that featured John Pertwee in character as the 3rd Doctor. Wowzers.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so, I mean, that I'm covering that at some point, sometime, I don't know when. And the comic strip was Time and Time Again, featuring the 7th Doctor, Benny and Ace, and all the other Doctors too, because it was Doctor Who's 30th anniversary.
So, was Dimensions in Time before 30 Years in the TARDIS?
I think it's a couple of weeks before, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, when is Children of Nude usually? October-ish time or early November? Okay. So Doctor Who was very much in the conversation.
Oh, it was the same week. Dimensions in Time was broadcast on the 26th of November and then the 27th, and this was the 29th.
My God, they barely let you get time to get over the pure hit of shite that was Dimensions in Time before you recovered with 30 Years in the TARDIS.
I didn't realise that Dimensions in Time was shit when it was in 1993.
No, and certainly if you were watching through those 3D glasses, it was more difficult to tell. So that certainly covered it a little bit. And you didn't know better. For my part, I don't think I'd seen Colin Baker before or Sylvester McCoy at that point. So that was all new to me. I didn't know anything.
And it was in 3 dimensions.
What was it?
No, it was. If I'm being generous, it was in 2.5, but it wasn't quite the 3D experience that Day of the Doctor was many years ago. Do you remember the period around not just this? I mean, the 30th anniversary era. Do you remember other programs, merch, things like that, or was it this documentary in particular?
It's hard to say precisely because it all seems to meld together at this point. I didn't realise that I'd got Curse of Peladon after this, for instance. I remember the logo being on videos at that time, the 30th anniversary logo. And I remember the Radio Times cover of Dimensions in Time. But I can't say for certain that I remember anything any more specific.
Yeah. Because there's a weird thing that happens to Doctor Who when it gets cancelled. There's instantly sort of, we've got B Sky B, we've got the sort of 91, 92, 93 repeats. So there's still clearly a great fondness for Doctor Who, but it's a nostalgic sort of, isn't this a bit funny? But, it's well worth the repeat, but not worth making the new stuff necessarily. So I think it would be fair to say, I don't think at this point nobody cared about Doctor Who, because those repeats were getting 3 or 4 million viewers. This documentary was commissioned. I think it's after the TV movie where people really stop giving a shit and it becomes like an actual joke in sort of popular culture.
Yeah, you can see that those ideas are forming within this documentary, though. It's got clearly much less of a serious tone or a worthy tone than Who's Doctor Who, and a much less openly affectionate tone than the Confidential episode to come. So it's kind of in a weird period where they're trying to define what Doctor Who was as far as public consciousness was concerned. And so, yeah, it also is interesting to watch this one and see if this was the origin of some of those stereotypes and the kind of reputation it held throughout the 90s. Do you know if the early repeats on B Sky B, were they just stuff from the 70s? Was there anything from the 80s?
There was 60s and 70s largely, but I mean, it's very obvious here that Kevin Davis, I've met a few times, he's a lovely man and very sort of self-deprecating and stuff, but I wonder if at the time he was putting this documentary together, he obviously shoots far more than we're going to see here, and we see the rest of it on video later. But I wonder if a combination of him being a child of the 70s and the BBC sort of going, Doctor Who was a bit shit in the 80s, means that you get quite an in-depth look at the first 4 Doctors, and then the other 3 Doctors are sort of brushed over. And also, as you say, we start to throw in those cliches of, I mean, we talk about is it too violent, but also we talk about perhaps some of the sillier aspects like the jokes and stuff like that. So,
yeah, it's hard to believe that Davison and McCoy aren't in it at all, despite them presumably being around and having been on screen in Dimensions in Time a couple of days earlier. Seems like a weird oversight, but who knows what happened there? I'm sure you do.
McCoy's in the extended version.
Oh, right.
So Davison isn't, but McCoy he's absolutely there. He's interviewed, he's sat with Sophie in an old laser quest. He's followed by some hemivores.
Memories are coming back to me now. I wasn't sure if that was a dream I had, but you have alerted me to the fact that it was in More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS. That's good. But obviously, like you say, because of the director's fandom and clearly the fact that the perception of the public, maybe reinforced by this, was that Doctor Who was a 1970s TV show in the main, plus the fact that Tom Baker is not involved in it in any way, means it's very heavily weighted towards John Pertwee and his era. And of course, you've got Terrance Dicks there, you've got Barry Letts there, you've got John Pertwee just seemingly hanging around South Bank of London, as I imagine he did every weekend, just waiting for somebody to come up to him and ask him a question about Doctor Who and his car and all that stuff.
Well, in the extended version, which is what he, ultimately Kevin Davis wanted to make, he makes 4 little episodes, each complete with cliffhangers and these reenactments of Susan going into the TARDIS, being chased by Daleks. We get pterodactyls attacking the Doctor and Autons and things like that. A little bit proving that you can still do Doctor Who on a cheap BBC budget. But here, it's sort of a weird mishmash of like, you don't realise, it works well, but you don't quite realise the function of these recreations. No,
but I will say I think they are among the most successful elements of the documentary as a whole. I definitely loved these as a kid. I remember distinctly that feeling like this reflected me as someone around the same age as this child at the time it was broadcast. And it kind of justified in my mind that it was okay to go out and pretend that there were these monsters around the corner and all that kind of stuff like you did. And they are really, really well shot. All the transitions between the sequences that are contemporary and the clips that they then go into, very nicely done, clearly very well thought out. And especially the motion-controlled shot at the end. I know we're blowing our wad early here, but that is some good shit. That is fantastic.
I mean, it's the Doctor Who you've always wanted to see. You see a character walk from outside into the TARDIS, and you can see it's not a backdrop, and it's something you don't even see properly done in the new series until the Matt Smith era.
I know. It's really impressively done, and I think, among the best parts of the documentary, and definitely the ones I remembered the best.
And what do we think about the talking heads that are not to do with Doctor Who. So we have people like Toya Wilcox, we've got Ken Livingstone, we've got Mike Gatting. It's quite I mean, I know what he was after. He'd said he wanted to get celebrity fans, and I think he approached some bigger celebrities who were known to be Doctor Who fans, and these were the sort of people he could get.
I had no idea who these people were at the time. I do more... Well, I know who they are now, but I immediately thought when I saw Toya Wilcox, was J&T involved in this? Because that seemed like a J&T hire. His name isn't on the credits as far as I could see at the end.
No, he's nothing to do with this at all.
It is a bizarre collection. Toya Wilcox, Mike Gatting, Ken Livingstone with a terrible mustache. And I'm not sure she counts as a celebrity, but Lowry Turner, the fashion editor, then went on to do some more TV stuff. I definitely remember that. But it is a weird collection. And that tells you a little bit about where Doctor Who was at the time. Although maybe it tells you more about where TV in the 90s was at the time. Maybe getting Toya Wilcox on your TV show in the early 90s was a big deal. I can't say I remember it being.
Possibly. So this wasn't like an out-and-out commission by the BBC. I think it was The Culture Show or something like that who had a slot on BBC Two and commissioned it. So it's very much a commission by a magazine show. And one of his early pitches was, actually, I'd like to do a sort of drama/documentary about the creation of Doctor Who. Not entirely dissimilar to Mark Gatiss' An Adventure in Time and Space, or Space and Time. But that was, obviously, Mark Gatiss was a complete dramatization. I think this one was going to be a bit more like 50-50.
Okay, well, you can definitely see that it's being pulled in quite a few different directions as you watch it. I said earlier it's like a long episode of the One Show, so that tracks with it being that kind of show. Plus, I seem to remember it going out about 8 p.m, so this is prime time BBC, so they are assuming that the audience are expecting this type of program with all these different segments in it and that kind of thing. I lost my patience with some of them this time around. They didn't seem to have anything to do with anything, really, and just seemed to be filling time that could have been used better, dare I say. But I guess that's just what they were working with at the time.
Yeah, I guess you're trying to fill the remit of the channel of like, we need to get a fashion designer to talk about the fashion because arts and things like that, and then you're trying to get a scientific approach of, is the science in Doctor Who real? But you've only got 2 minutes to do it.
Yeah, they get that doctor from Oxford, very like a soundbite to talk about how time travel might be possible or some such thing.
Yeah.
Feels like they're just fulfilling the remit of the BBC at that moment for 30 seconds, the short amount of time they can get away with it.
I could be wrong, but I don't think, like, of this version, everything makes it into the extended version apart from that guy. I think, I could be wrong, someone will text and tell me that I'm wrong, but that is the bit that sticks out the most to me. I was like, I'm not sure I've seen this particular bit of it, in the way that on Doctor Who's anniversary last year, I sat down and watched the More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS as sort of my little anniversary thing. As we said, like, I'm a bit annoyed that it sort of brushes over the 80s, even though Colin Baker's there sort of talking about the character of the Doctor in general. And, you know, we've got 80s writers there. Ben Anaronovich is there. But I do like that it gives a bit more time to the companions, even though it is sort of fulfilling those cliches. But for me, it was about the archive at the time, and not just the archive of clips from Doctor Who stories I'd never seen, but clips from like the Walls ice lollies and things like that just, you know, Blue Peter and stuff. It's like, that's really selling to me. It's exciting for me as sort of a 10-year-old in 1993, but it's also as a piece of documentary going, look at the cultural impact of this program and how big it was in its heyday.
Yeah, this one leans into Dalek mania in a way that Who's Doctor Who doesn't touch at all, and it's almost given equal weight. And it makes me wonder how much my perception of the show was, of it being Doctor Who and the Daleks, really, was formed by seeing this when I was growing up. Because it's a very worthwhile discussion to have. that being really the cultural peak of Doctor Who, when the Daleks were huge.
Yeah.
And so I can understand why they weighted it in that direction. Like you say, there's a bit of stuff about the companions. It's kind of dismissive. It just does that that song. Was it Roberta Tovey?
Yeah.
They play that alongside a montage. But really the Daleks are given a very prominent place, quite rightly, in the history of Doctor Who. That interestingly is only really explored in this documentary after the show was off the air. It's not in the confidential one so much, and it's not in Who's Doctor Who, but in this one where they're forming the idea of what Doctor Who was as a TV show, the Daleks are as big a part of it as the Doctor.
And I think you could be forgiven for thinking that Roberta Tovey was a bit of a bigger part of Doctor Who than she was from this documentary, in terms of she's one of the talking heads. They even recreate one of the sets from the Dalek films and have a chatting in it. You get her song in it. And actually, Kevin Davis does another straight-to-video documentary called Dalek Mania, where he looks particularly at the two Dalek movies. So for a couple of years, Roberta Tovey, a one-off companion from a 60s sort of spin-off film, is everywhere, and sort of like she shows up on what is it, like breakfast television with John Pertwee at one point, and like Russell Tovey's just Roberta Tovey.
Imagine if like a 2-year-old Russell Tovey was such a big part of this. That's real time travel. But I didn't know that the director of this did Dalek Mania. That makes so much sense now. So much sense. And I will say that as a fan growing up, those Doctor Who films, the Dalek films rather, loomed large. They were more readily available than most TV Doctor Who was. And I definitely saw 2150 AD among the first 5 Doctor Who stories I saw. So I just thought that was Doctor Who.
Yeah, it was regularly repeated on television. They were in video shops in a way that video shops didn't always carry TV, but they carried the film versions of Dalek's Invasion of Earth and the Daleks. So I guess, we're in that video generation. It makes sense to focus on Roberta Tovey because she's a companion that probably more people watching it at the time would have access to than Dodo was, or something like that.
Yeah, and if it's looking at an overview of what Doctor Who was, not just as a TV show, but like you say, they're adding the walls, adverts and that kind of thing, what it was as a cultural phenomenon, then it makes a lot of sense to include the films in there as part of it.
Yeah. It was interesting revisiting this 50-minute version, which I have not seen in a very long time. And it is tonally very different from the More Than 30 Years version. More Than 30 Years is a documentary that is a treasure trove for fans. This is very much takes itself slightly more seriously, I think, even though, you should say, there's still moments of levity within it. I think this takes itself more seriously because it's a prestige BBC Two documentary.
It's hard for me to say now. I hadn't seen it in so long, and I had such strong nostalgic memories of it. And yet somehow so many of the details had gone and perhaps were like subsumed by the more than 30 Years in the TARDIS version, that it was weird to go back and watch this version. And it I don't want to show my hand, but I was kind of unsatisfied by it. I was the one who suggested it for this podcast, but I almost wish I'd left the memories alone because it was such a big impact on me at the time. I remember being I was staying with Mikey at the time. I remember his mum brought us a cup of Horlicks with desiccated coconut that she always did, that I really liked. I remember being sat there in his bedroom watching this on the TV. And at the time, it was the most thrilling thing I'd probably ever experienced as a child.
I think I know where you're going to go with your rating, perhaps. But, I mean, are there other aspects of it you want to talk about?
Again, like the Philip Hinchcliffe thing where I expected it to go hard cut into the rat, where he was talking about the one thing that breaks the illusion. There's a quote from Eric Sayward where he's talking about you can't go too violent on Doctor Who. And then later, but about 5-10 minutes later, there's a montage of Doctor Who being really violent.
Yeah, and actually, the way they cut it makes those scenes look even more violent than they are when you watch the episodes.
Yeah, exactly. But they don't hard cut from Eric Sayward either. And I think mentally going forward, I'm just going to put that hard cut in myself. I really enjoyed the nice Buddhist man, Barry Letts, being gleeful that a child of his friend was scared that its teddy bear would come alive and strangle him.
Yeah.
He really seemed thrilled by that. And I was wondering if, the colour of monsters is green from Terrance Dicks. Does that originate from this?
Yeah, that comes from here. Also, seeing Mary Whitehouse and something that I quote often, a lot of Doctor Who fans do, of I can see it now in my mind's eye. When I will say that at work, and in the back of my head, I'm thinking of Mary Whitehouse.
Yes, that's burned into your brain, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
It's burned into my mind's eye.
Exactly.
And the weird facts that...
the fact files, my God. The first one they come up with the Daleks, essential information for the Daleks, is that the word Dalek means far and distant thing in Serbo-Croat. That's the most essential thing you can know about a Dalek. And that stood me in good stead as a Doctor Who fan going forward.
A Yeti's roar is a flushing lavatory, all those facts.
If Nicholas Courtney is saying it, then you believe it. I have no idea if those things are true. I have no reason to disbelieve that they're true. He told me that, so it's true as far as I'm concerned.
Well, exactly. Nick Courtney would never lie to us.
God, I hope not.
Okay, so I'm going to play my hand first. More than 30 years in the TARDIS, I have seen countless times, and I rate it an unmitigated banger. This, I was quite shocked at the slightness of this version and how tonally different it was, which I think was right for the broadcast slot and the audience it was aimed at. Like you, I don't quite have the nostalgia revisiting this version that I thought I would have, but I still have to give it a banger for what it achieved at the time.
It's an 8-year-old banger. That's a horrible turn of phrase, and I apologise for that. As an 8-year-old, I perceived it as a banger, even though I didn't know that word, and I very much enjoyed it. But having seen all these clips so many times before, and I think having fonder memories of the More Than version, quite frankly, at this point, it is a reluctant, I can't do it. I don't think I can do it. God, this is tense. No, I've got to stick with what I felt when I was watching it. I thought it was kind of an average meander, with the massive caveat that all these anecdotes were repeated on so many DVD extras after this, that I saw all the stories, and that More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS also came out afterwards. So I think the broadcast version, for that reason, is, in comparison, an average meander. And I apologise, and I will never do another podcast again.
Not at all. And look, I think we've said the extended version bangs so very hard, but we're going broadcast. We're breaking the rules all over the place in this podcast today. We're doing things that are on telly.
Extraordinary.
Too hot for TV.
The final thing we're going to look at is Do You Remember the First Time, which is an episode of Doctor Who Confidential broadcast on BBC Three on the 9th of June 2007. It was both directed and presented by David Tennant. News at the time, the Christmas special was gearing up to film. Speculation over the future of the series was rampant, despite having 3 successful series already aired on television. And other news in DWM at the time was Chris Evans and Billie Piper had finalised their divorce, always hitting the big headlines.
She'd go on to marry well next time, though, as I recall.
Terrible taste in men. Terrible taste. On television, we had episodes of Totally Doctor Who. We had The Infinite Quest. We had The Family of Blood, Blink, Utopia, The Sound of Drums, and Last of the Time Lords. From Big Finish, we had Valhalla, featuring the 7th Doctor, Bernie Summerfield, Freedom of Information, and No More Lies, featuring the 8th Doctor and Lucy. On DVD, we had Robot and Series 3, Volume 2. We also had the online game Eye of the TARDIS, and the comic strip was The Woman Who Sold the World.
My God, you'd be drowning in Doctor Who if you wanted to.
And we were. So we're back in an era where Doctor Who is one of the most popular things on television.
Yeah, and for me personally, I felt that this, I think even specifically to these few weeks, I could say this was my peak as a fan in the modern age. And this was right after Blink, so it came after a great episode of Doctor Who. The next week is Utopia.
Fuck me.
what a fucking Doctor Who sandwich this is.
The moment in Utopia, I watch Utopia now and it loses some of its impact because you know what's going to happen, and actually the first sort of 20 minutes are fairly average Doctor Who. But that moment at the time when he was revealed and the pocket watch, I've got goose pimples thinking about it right now.
Yeah, that's an absolute time and place thing for me as well. Believe it or not, I was with my friend Mikey and he was living in his own place and we were in a living room.
Ooh.
And our good friend Gino was there and he'd come round to watch us watching Doctor Who. He did not care less about Doctor Who. And he'd come over because he enjoyed so much watching how much we got from watching Doctor Who. And that was the peak of it. It was an extraordinary time.
You were a viewing event in yourself, let alone the television show.
Wow. The power of Russell at the time.
Now, I tell you how much things have changed, because obviously everybody lost their shit when Doctor Who dropped on iPlayer at midnight, and everyone was like, but I'll know what happens. This is how much things have changed. The weekend of Utopia, I was on holiday in Spain, and my mum recorded it for me, and nobody spoiled. I got back on the Sunday night, went over to my mum's and watched it straight away, and I got a couple of text messages from people going, Doctor Who was brilliant, but nobody spoiled that. I must have gone on the internet. I think you could get the internet on your phone in this day, but it would have been very basic. You know, early days of Facebook, things like that. I did not get spoiled that the big reveal.
The golden age, you might say.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, my phone will randomly give me an update the moment something happens in the television show, and I don't know why I can't turn it off.
It's not even a spoiler, it's just like an emoji of like a furious face or like a side eye or just a for fuck's sake, just that. Something, you know, we've really matured as a fandom, I like to think.
So we know where you were at the time when this aired. Now, I remember this airing too, because by this point I was still watching Confidential. And I did stop watching it after a while because, I got kind of bored of the format. But I remember this one dropping and being, well, not dropping, being broadcast because I watched it go out live on the television. And I thought, oh, this is something that's really different and special and unique. And I think it had quite a big impact on me. Because at the time, I was not planning on... When I was a kid, I wanted to be going to television. And then I stopped wanting to go into television and wanted to go into the music industry. And it was sort of Doctor Who coming back that started to spur my interest in that again. Things like Confidential and stuff, even though I'd had this interest before. And I remember seeing this one and going, oh, you could be a Doctor Who fan that makes Doctor Who. And I obviously don't do that for a living. But I'm not saying this is a huge influence, but I think it was a little influence for me that got me into the industry I'm in now.
That's interesting because this one focuses a lot less on the tedious part of making a TV show in front of a green screen and more on just the impact it had on the people who were involved. And so that's the reason you wanted to work in it more than the fact that you'd have to stay up at 3:00 in the morning in a freezing quarry filming John Barrowman. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I wanted to make Doctor Who, and now I want to make Doctor Who less. But when I actually got into the industry and got into sort of positions where I could, I'm not saying I would get the job, but I could definitely get in the room for a job on the show. But the idea that whether I love or loathe the current era, that my biggest fear is that I would go and work on Doctor Who and have a terrible time, because I know how hard it is to make any television show, and it would ruin Doctor Who for me. So I actually now don't want to work on the show, but at the time, I was like, not only could I get into television, I could work on Doctor Who.
Yes. So something I didn't mention before this point was that my first professional involvement with Doctor Who preceded doing any Big Finish stuff. And it was because my friend Mikey, who I haven't mentioned prior to this, through various years of effort, became a runner on a few days on Doctor Who. He went through the system, Casualty, Doctor Who. He was in Cardiff. You know how it goes. He got chatting to the stills photographer, Adrian Rogers, who did, I think, from season 1 or 2 until about series 8. And Adrian needed an assistant or wanted an assistant for that series. Mike gives me a text. Do you want to come and be a stills photography assistant on Doctor Who? I said, yes, I do. And so for series 8 of Doctor Who, Peter Capaldi's first series, I was on set. Not all the time, because I was only doing stills. It wasn't unit photography. And what it means is you're coming in once per episode, basically, maybe for a day, maybe for 2, and you're shooting the actors, the props, and anything relevant from the episode that is then going to go on to merchandising and all that kind of stuff. Amazing. But I was in the room. I was there, not exactly interacting with production. They were getting on. We were somewhere else. But I was in the factory where the sausage was being made. And I do question how much that affected my relationship with the show. Because you can't put that back in the bottle afterwards.
Right.
It's not like when I watch that era, I'm thinking about, the back wall of the set or anything like that. You can turn that off very easily. But having that kind of involvement, it does break the spell. Yeah. As much as you can put it on TV and confidential, and you can do it as tediously as you like, which they did several weeks earlier when they showed about 5 minutes of footage of Tennant and Hines dancing or learning how to dance, the nadir of Doctor Who Confidential. And when you go in the room, it's going to change how it feels. And I have to admit, I think it probably did. And so everything after then, it's got a slightly different view on it. And that is what it is. You can't change that. Yeah. But I totally understand your logic as somebody who works in TV, but you've had the sense to realise that unless I guess you were the person making it, just being the person on the edges of it would kind of break it a little bit.
So I work as a line producer, and I've been moving into producing, and I would like to produce some Doctor Who, but people often say to me, well, what would happen if you got hold of Doctor Who as a producer? And it's like, well, you don't get hold of it as a producer. Like, it's the showrunner and the execs who are doing what people think of, like Graham Williams and Philip Hinchcliffe and JNT were doing. Like, I would have very little say in sort of I would be there to get the thing made, but right. I would have if I was the producer on Space Babies, I wouldn't have been able to make that show any better.
Okay. Are you saying you took your name off it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there's a man called Rillan Dees who was the producer on that episode. I mean, that's just people misunderstanding the things that. But yeah, I would hate to be part of that machine, and because you can also. I've worked on some brilliant things where I've had a terrible time because it's been a hellish production. So imagine associating with your favourite TV show one of the worst professional experiences you've ever had.
Yeah, and you can't predict that going in, obviously. Yeah. And it's still a production that's made in South Wales. So at the very least, the weather's going to be shit. So that aspect is taken out of it. It's not like it's going to be a holiday. You're going to be in South Wales. So you're going to have to deal with that for a start. That's fine for me. I grew up here. Yeah. But beyond that, I can't recommend. No, I shouldn't say that. But this, I don't think it's an illusion. This sells you on the truth of what these middle-aged white men thought about Doctor Who. Now, that's something interesting to discuss, because as much as I love this, it is just middle-aged white men talking about how much they love Doctor Who. And that's why we're saying it's the golden age.
I am 41 years old. I must be about the same age as some of those middle-aged white men in that room there. I mean, I know, I looked this up on the last thing, but I was like, I wonder how old Roberta Tovey is in 30 years in the TARDIS. And I was like, she's 41. I'm like, fuck.
Oh, no.
Stephen Moffat of Blink and Russell T Davies of Series 3 can't be much older than me now.
No.
Certainly, judging by a lot of hairlines, they aren't anyway.
I mean, there's a phrase later on where Tennant and Phil Collinson and Russell T Davies are sat in that restaurant down Cardiff Bay, where I was last for a 40th birthday party about 3 months ago, by the way. They are saying, I think Tennant says it, he's like, and I'm sure Doctor Who will be renewed again in about 20 years. And it is now about 20 years later, and I was just thinking, not so much. It's pretty much the same, David, actually. But we're all 20 years older.
Phil Collinson says in the same conversation, he goes, "Hey, this has been the best job of my life, and I'm going to have to go through the next 25 years of my career knowing I'll never get anything that match it or do anything like it."
My God, the monkey's paw curled at that very moment he said it.
The thing that I think got me at the time and still gets me is it's a bunch of people who have quite clearly worked very hard in their career, and I just feel so lucky and so grateful to be there making that show. And it's the sort of energy that first Russell T Davies era had that made me really grateful for the people making it and what they were bringing to it. Not so much now, but we're not doing Doctor Who Unleashed.
No, there is like a joyfulness to the whole thing. There is an affection and a passion and an unashamed fandom in this particular edition of Confidential that is just a joy to watch. It really is. There's, unlike 1993, where there is a hint of it, of perhaps the coming reputation of Doctor Who, this is once again Doctor Who is at its peak, like it was for Who's Doctor Who. So there's nothing to be ashamed about. You can be as proud of your fandom as you like. You can be as niche with your fandom as you like. And particularly because this is a BBC series that's directed at the fans, no one's having to make it for a mainstream audience. So when the contributors are referencing tiny little things that happened in obscure stories, you can show those and don't have to explain it.
Because there are two types of fan watching. Fans who get those references and fans who want to find out what those references mean. There is 300,000 people tuning into this programme, and all of them, I think you could say at the time, were Doctor Who fans, because you don't watch a programme like that unless you are a fan.
You don't watch Doctor Who Confidential on a regular basis if you're not. But this particular edition really indulges in the aspect that I found enjoyable. You know, it is the one episode of Doctor Who Confidential that stands out to me, that I remember fondly, you know?
When Doctor Who was all put on iPlayer and everybody was very excited, so the first thing I did was obviously watch the Tales of the TARDIS sort of bookends. And then I was like, well, what am I going to watch? And I obviously realised, well, I've seen all of this. You know, it's a lot of it's not new. And I thought, do you know what? They've got Confidential. And I went back and I watched this episode. And then I watched an episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures that I'd not seen because I'm not really there's nothing wrong with the Sarah Jane Adventures. It's just I was in my mid-20s when it came out, and I'm now 41 years old. I'm just not the target audience. But revisiting this, I was like, great to have this at my fingertips. And later on, I tried to watch some more Confidential, and I was just like, fuck this. It's just...
Yeah. At the end of the episode where there's that link from David Tennant where he's like, next week is back to usual, filming in a quarry in the dark. And I'm like, yeah. I don't think I'm going to follow this particular series, to be honest. But it was a pleasant surprise that it was kind of the inverse of 30 Years in the TARDIS, where for so long only the 15-minute version has been widely available. I suppose if you looked for it, you could find this version, which I never thought to do. Yeah. But to see the full version again, it really kind of lived up to the promise. I will say, for the first 5 minutes, where they incessantly play the one song and don't let a single shot linger for more than 5 seconds, I was like, here we go again. The memory cheats. I'm not going to be able to make it through this. But it kind of settles down after those first 5 minutes.
Confidential loves a montage to a pop song that you know, and this time, obviously, it's Do You Remember the First Time? There were people I'd forgot that was in it, you know. The Dead Ringers team are in it. We obviously got Moffat, I remember him being in it, but we get Gareth Roberts and we get Mark Gatiss, we get Tranter and Gardner, we get Barnaby Edwards and Nick Briggs. There's a whole plethora of people.
Yeah, who don't, it seems, mention Big Finish for some reason. They get to say, we made these audio plays, but it's like they've been barred from saying the words Big Finish for some reason.
It's like they can't mention a commercial venture or something on BBC Three. I bet it's then going, well, you'll be accused of trying to sell stuff to kids.
That's very true. You're probably right. And this particular documentary's clang for me was during David Tennant's link at the beginning, where he asked, does Doctor Who make you a better person? And I am certainly expecting a hard cut to one of the contributors. And a thought pops in my head. No, it does not. It does not make you a better person.
I wonder which contributor you could be talking about. How do we feel the coverage of the episode it's related to, so the coverage of Blink is handled here?
I zoned out at those points. I just didn't care. I mean, obviously, Carey Mulligan and, I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the male actor.
The other fella.
The other guy come across very well. And it's nice that they got to meet David Tennant in a corridor somewhere in South Wales. But they're there, they do their thing, and they're gone. Actually, if that was they occupy about as much space in the episode as the production stuff does in Who's Doctor Who.
Yeah, I think it just feels more jarring here because I don't know. There's something so sort of like, oh, Doctor Who fanny, and then Doctor Who fanish, not fanny.
My God.
There's something so fanish about most of it that when you do cut to the more generic stuff, you're like, oh, this isn't what I'm here for. And I'm guessing, I don't know, if you watch the cut down Confidential, it's probably more made up of the Blink stuff than the fan stuff.
I imagine you're right, yeah. So it was fine. It did what it needed to. And I think it did provide, it's sickening, actually, how much of a natural presenter David Tennant is, as well as everything else he's quite good at. He's a really good presenter. He asks good questions. He's very natural on camera, speaking directly to camera. Not everyone can do that. And he's good with Carey Mulligan and the other guy. And he asks them the questions that relate to the program. And it makes for a very satisfying documentary as a whole. It's very well put together.
It is. It's a fun documentary. It makes you feel like you're part of an exclusive club. I know that sounds weird, but to see people telling relatable stories about fandom on television on a Saturday night in 2007 is just like, oh, that's the experience I've been through in my teenage years previously when I thought nobody cared about this fucking program.
Yeah. Everyone seems to be excited to be involved with it because it's a hit again. And that really comes across on screen, I think. Some of it's dated. I actually think this era of Doctor Who is now going through its awkward teenage years in a really visible way, and everything does. But the fact that it's standard definition, the fashion of the time, all that kind of stuff, it's right in your face, and nostalgia has not caught up with it yet. We're not on the 20 years quite for this part.
Having Gareth Roberts as one of your talking heads.
There was a newspaper clipping as well that I noticed where they were talking to Jane Tranter, and this clip comes up and it says, Ducky Who, Time Lord has gay show writer.
Oh, yeah.
And that's shown on screen and you can read it clearly, and it's completely unremarked upon by the contributors or anything. There's no context for it. It's simply delivered as this was how it was reported in the media when Doctor Who was coming back, which is, that was what it was like at the time. That's just what it is. Just interesting to note it now.
And, if we're talking about other ways that it looks like the awkward, what was Russell T Davies's quiffy hair about? And Phil Collinson really needed to shave his head, and I don't even think he's shaved it yet.
Maybe he's had a hair transplant. I couldn't speak to that.
Like Chris Chibnall.
I'm thinning a bit on top, and I try and keep it as short as possible so that it looks intentional. But there was certainly a period there where I realised that just no one had told me. And I simply hadn't caught myself at the right angle in the mirror to notice it for myself. So perhaps when Phil watched this episode, he stormed into the offices of Doctor Who the following Monday and was like, why did no one tell me?
Is there anything else you want to say on Do You Remember the First Time?
I mean, they were working Tennant to the bone. I know they paid him well at the time, but it's like, hey, David, you got a couple of weeks off. Fancy doing a documentary? Mad. I mean, I don't know how, he probably aged a lot in the time that he was doing Doctor Who, like American presidents do. And I don't know how he did it.
I think everybody who worked on that first run and worked on the show since is really amazed at how much television they produced in that time and the machine that they had going. And I think that's one of the big in entitled fandoms where people go, oh, well, we used to get 13 episodes every year and now we get 8 every 2 years or whatever the latest number is. And it's like, it was a very particular set of circumstances and a particular group of people at the right time in their lives who wanted to make this thing a success so much that they just went all out for 4 or 5 years to do it. And actually, like, you look at those people, they were young, if not single, like in relationships, but not had kids and things like that. And all of a sudden you get producers coming in that have got kids, that have got families, and producers, writers, and they're like, well, no, it's hard enough as it is. I'm not putting my family through this stress. You know, my life's more important than this program.
Yeah, and at the time, you've really got to give Julie Gardner and Rusty Davis especially the credit. They were effectively building a TV industry in Cardiff from scratch. Not to say the talent wasn't there, clearly it was. So they had to prove people wrong all the time. And so they probably swung so much harder to convince people that you could make TV. And they didn't want to risk not making TV. So they just kept making TV. That's how they did it. And then once that was established, I suppose you can maybe slow down, take your time a little more. Don't know if that was a good idea. But at the time, it was from nothing, they built an empire, basically.
Absolutely.
A couple of other thoughts. The music, which of course was such a vital part of the Confidential experience.
Indeed. Snow Patrol all the way.
That you got these literal, they were tangential, I suppose is the correct word. You had Ruby by the Kaiser Chiefs, which I didn't understand the connection there.
No.
Is Thanks for the Memories, is that by Fall Out Boy? I wrote down Fall Out Boy.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good one. And very, very briefly, you get a clip of Know Your Enemy by Rage Against the Machine, which absolutely thrilled me. I was like, oh, fuck, Rage Against the Machine on Doctor Who Confidential. But they only play it for about 10 seconds, and it's right before a montage about monsters, hence Know Your Enemy. But my God, worlds colliding moment for me there.
I love it when things like that happen. I remember there was an episode of Torchwood, where there was some Roots Maneuver played, and I was like, I love Roots Maneuver. Doctor Who and Roots Maneuver are combined finally. And it was just, a bit of background music in a scene, and I was like, this is...
Was it Witness? It was Witness the Fitness, I'd imagine, was it?
No, I think it was one of his more obscure tracks.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Somebody knew what they... Deep Cut. Somebody knew what they were talking about.
Deep Cut, yeah.
I noted that we were 3 for 3 with 3 Doctors clips. I think the same clip is used in all 3 of the documentaries that we watched. Apparently that's like a deal you have to make, as a Terry Nation-like deal that you sign when you have to make a Doctor Who documentary. It's like, well, you can do anything you like, but you have to show this 30 seconds of the 3 Doctors. So that's just part of it. So I noted that. And the other bit was that David Tennant referenced the clown bit in Deadly Assassin, which was the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my life when I saw that. And it made me cry. It's the only bit of Doctor Who that's ever made me cry. Intentionally scared, not for other reasons. But to be scared by it, that exact moment. It was nice to have that bonding moment with David.
Indeed. So, if we've said it all, we must rate it. Is it a clanger, a banger, or an average meander?
For so many reasons, this absolutely matched my memory of it. And perhaps I'm still in that haze of recent Doctor Who memories in terms of my own lifespan, where I remembered those being the good times. And I think it's a genuinely great documentary. I really do. I think the fact that it's David Tennant presenting it adds another layer again, which we didn't really talk about. But the fact that the Doctor himself is the one, leading this celebration of Doctor Who, new and old, really tells you that say like a unified vision on the part of the show.
It's because we won. We won. The fans took over the asylum. Doctor Who was played by a Doctor Who fan, and it wasn't some chubby guy in a velvet jacket like you used to get in all the fan films.
The world should have ended there, probably, and perhaps we could have died happy, but I doubt it. So, for that and many reasons, it's a banger. I think I remember it more fondly than a lot of episodes from around that time. It really left an impression on me. It's a great piece of work. Aside from some of the editing and music, it holds up really well. and some contributors, I suppose you could say. Yeah, a brilliant piece of work all round.
Agreed. It bangs here too. And it's okay for these things to date. As you say, the editing, the style of editing and stuff like that, it's very BBC Three, Doctor Who Confidential, 2007. Here we are. It's 19 years old now or something, that 18, 19 years old. It's allowed to date, but I remember it fondly. And I would, from this era, I'd rather watch this than The Doctor's Daughter.
And so say all of us.
Too hot for TV.
Is there anything you want to push? Want to tell people where they can find you on the internet? Anything like that?
Yes, please. My latest bit of work, most significant latest bit of work, is a animated short film called Spectre of the Bear. It is a conspiracy comedy about crisps. It stars Craig Roberts and Bill Nighy. It was nominated for British Animation Awards and a BAFTA Cymru Award. Didn't win them, so lower your expectations slightly. But award nominated, and it was broadcast as part of a short film run that was on BBC Wales at the end of last year. But if you look for Spectre of the Bear on BBC iPlayer, you will find it there. It's only 11 minutes long. I hope you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, don't tell me. I don't want to know. My ego is too fragile. But I think you'll have a fun 11 minutes. I really do. Spectre of the Bear.
Excellent. I will check that out, and I encourage all the listeners to do so too. Do you have any social media handles you want to plug?
I mean, I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter, but who gives a fuck about any of that stuff anymore?
Still part of the Quiz Rassilon?
I mean, I'm there in the background. It's in the... More often than not, it's at the BFI these days, which is a lovely position to be in, but I can't make it down to London really to help with it. So I tend to do some of the artwork. I tend to contribute questions, all that kind of stuff. I'm involved, but Mike is the one leading it all the way. So he deserves all the credit for the success it's achieved in London. But I'm in the background somewhere involved. And if you're in London at the BFI, usually for one of the screenings they put on there, which are fantastic, pop along to the Quiz of Rassilon afterward. You'll probably have a good time.
And if you want to hear more about Mikey, who we've mentioned several times on this, he was one of the very early guests, I think, on episode 6 or 7 of the podcast. And I must get him back at some point soon too. But if you want to know more about Mikey Snooze or Mikey Williams, that's where you will find it.
You'll have to edit out so much stuff if he comes back on, though. I'm just warning you.
Next time, I'm joined by Conrad Westmus, and we're going to be looking at 2 real oddities. First up, it's the Doctor Who 1970s Trump game. Then it's Who is Tom Baker? Unauthorized, a straight-to-video documentary about Tom Baker from the late 90s. But until next time, I've been Dylan.
And I've been Ioan.
And this has been Doctor Who Too Hot for TV.
Too hot for TV.